Hello, Arenacraft listeners. Arjuna here, just letting you know that this is a bonus episode. This was originally the episode that we recorded to release last week, but then we had the emergency ban announcement and we scrambled to make a more relevant episode. So some of the information in this podcast is a little bit old, a little bit outdated, but we thought that there was some entertaining stuff in here and a fun rant at the end about, well, we'll let you get there if you're interested in listening to the episode. So let's travel back in time to before Teferi was banned and enjoy. Hello, and welcome to yet another episode of the Arenacraft podcast, a show dedicated exclusively to Magic the Gathering Arena. My name is Arjuna, I'm one of your hosts, and for the other host today, I've prepared a little song, so I hope that you're all ready. The song goes like this. This is CGB, this is CGB, 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 he's the best at MTG, better than watching TV, CGB! How's it going today, my friend?
What the heck was that? I didn't know he was gonna do that. I deduct points for being derivative.
Derivative, man. I'm riffing on you, man.
It's very close to my mono red song.
I'm working with your style, you know.
Trademark pending. They're gonna have to pay me for that one.
I slipped it in under the trademark. So for those of you not familiar, CGB has a mono red song, which is much beloved by many people who hate mono red as much as he does, and that would be a fun thing to go look up. Maybe if we have an easy link to it, I'll put a link in the show notes there.
Oh no. Okay.
It's been a busy week for me. I've been moving house. And so I'm recording this from a new location. I actually had to work for a while yesterday to get all my stuff set up so I could actually be ready to record this show. But it's nice. I'm in a new place and I'm really enjoying it. So that's cool. But as a result, I haven't really streamed at all this last week. I haven't been playing much in general. But I have been observing and checking in on a number of different things. There's been some cool things happening this last week, so we'll talk about that today. But first, how are you doing, my man?
I'm good. Yesterday was the end of the July Mythic season, so I got to do the video I really, at first, always dreaded doing and now really enjoy, which is the last day of season playing Mythic Ladder and seeing how high up the ladder you can get, because the swings on the last day of the season are so extreme and there's just more stakes, so there's more tension in everything that's going on. If you play against somebody who's 99% Mythic with an hour left in the season, they feel as if they're really competing for something, and so do you. So it used to be the kind of content I dreaded. Now it's the kind that's very fun. So that video went up today. It's called Boomer Blue White because it has like some old school flavor. It has Baneslayer Angel and Absorb and
nice.
Like cards that you shouldn't play in Standard, but the as you would see in the video, it's like the idea is that everybody's going to play aggro. And if people are playing aggro without good removal spells, Baneslayer Angel is 5 mana, win the game. Like, Baneslayer is terrible against Teferi, it's terrible against Elspeth Conqueror's Death, it's terrible against Brazen Borrower, but if nobody plays those cards, it's 5 mana, win the game. And it was kind of amazing how that went.
Well, and it's just nice sometimes to get back to your roots, you know? Just, like, play an older style of deck. And, hey, sometimes you get to see why those decks were so successful in the past, so that's awesome. Well, okay, so this week we have a little bit of a grab bag of topics, but some juicy stuff. We're going to check in on the PT finals. They are happening as we're recording this, and so there's a top 8 going on, and we'll look at a couple of deck lists that stand out to us with that. Also, speaking of Boomer Magic, this week there was a massive event going on in the Twitch-verse. Crokeyz issued a challenge to paper boomers everywhere to come and play versus him. You know, it was like a little low-key tournament that he did. And for every loss, he ended up donating $500 to charity. So that was really cool. We'll get into, what he played, how it went, the smack talking, etc., etc., etc. So let's talk about this PT top 8. So the first thing that I noticed, CGB, about this top 8 is how fair and balanced of a metagame this is looking. Look, we have a cool 50% of the field playing Reclamation. And is that not just the definition of a balanced metagame? Half are playing it, half aren't. It's just, glass half full, glass half empty. What do you think, CGB?
I mean, if you like it, if you like a solid divide between good and evil, you've got it. I mean, it was a huge part of the meta, and 4-color Reclamation put up tremendous numbers and conversion rate. I don't think it surprised anybody to see that half of the top 8 was Teamer Rec. I think if you had taken the poll, and I heard some podcasts talking about this, I think people would have said some people would have guessed 5 or 6 Reclamation decks in top 8. So it could be worse, I guess. But there are a few heroes.
Yeah, so one of the things that stands out to me about this top 8 is that we have 4 Reclamation lists, and then every other list is different, right? So we have 4 of the same deck and then 4 different decks. And so in a way it's kind of cool because we get to basically see like the best of the challenger bracket here. Not the official challenger bracket, but like the metagame challenger bracket here. So first of all, we have Azorius Control by Raph Levy. He managed to pilot it to a top 8 finish, although unfortunately was just knocked out today. So it didn't manage to take him the distance. And
spoilers. I don't know who's been knocked in or out. You monster!
All right.
That was my hero. How could you? I can't continue the podcast. The blue-white mage is out. I need to. I'm inconsolable. I'm inconsolable. I'm going to go stare out the window. Talk to me Monday. Bye. No.
CGB is going to distill a liquor from his own tears and then proceed to get drunk off of it for the rest of the weekend.
I heard a quick cool story about this deck. Raphael Levy, of course, is a French Hall of Famer, and other French Hall of Famer and consensus like top 5 player of all time, Gabriel Nassif, is a known blue-white player and streamer. And Nassif built this deck, gave the list to Levy. They both played the deck, and they had to play each other in round 1.
Savage.
Gabriel Nassif went, it's the worst. And then Levy, of course, won the match. Because we find him here in top 8, it would have been very hard to lose round 1 and then get there. Nassif went on to have a pretty bad players tour overall, but his deck and the spirit of blue-white control would live on in Raphael Levy, and that was going to sound a lot cooler until I found out he was eliminated. But I was going to say that, Nassif's heart will go on, but now I know it's dead like my hopes and dreams.
So the player who eliminated him was actually Michael Jacob playing Mardu Winota, which I know that you took for a spin in one of your videos this week. And it was, as per usual, it was a pretty convincing performance from him. So I was curious if you had any thoughts on this deck after having taken it for a spin.
This deck is absurdly good. One of my students also played it all week, put up an over 80% win rate in best of 3 Mythic with this deck. People aren't really prepared to deal with it. Basri's Lieutenant is kind of I told you so moment for me because I thought that card was really good, but nobody found a home for it until now. And nobody knows how to beat that card. There was a lot of testing going on through the week, and people eventually came to the conclusion that the 4-color rec deck shouldn't even play Solar Blaze against it because it just doesn't do anything against this deck. And Solar Blaze was one of the key innovations for the 4-color Reclamation deck, because in 4-color Reclamation, it's very hard to cast Storm's Wrath or Shatter the Sky from their mana base, but it's easy to cast a Solar Blaze. And it hit before it hit everything you needed to out of mono green and out of sacrifice and out of mono red, but doesn't touch Mardu Winota. Like the deck does not care. Basri's Lieutenant does not care. And Yeah, this deck is very real. The spot that I find to be the flex spot is the freebooters, and I've been trying to figure out how to manage the 3 freebooter spot for best of 1 or for a different meta in best of 3. Bone Crusher Giant, Heartless Act are 2 considerations. I do feel like it should be some card that is good if you are on the draw, because I think the deck is mostly just kind of a roll you over deck, and if it's on the draw, it's good draw versus the opponent's good draw. It can just lose to an Embercleave sometimes. So for that spot, there's 2 other things that are kind of off the wall. I want to try Deafening Clarion, because I think it actually misses enough of the cards in the deck, or you don't care if they die because you get knights from the lieutenants, or you make everything indestructible with Tajik, so you do a one-sided Clarion, that kind of thing.
Yeah, you could even, you could even potentially like do get some Winota triggers and then Clarion post-combat, and all the people you summoned up with Winota will be indestructible. So yeah, stuff like that.
Yeah, like I thought that sounded pretty interesting. And then the other thing I'm thinking is Priest of Forgotten Gods.
Oh, that's a spicy one.
It is. It's a human, so you can hit it with the Winota. And you have, like, Raise the Alarm, Woe Strider, Lazotep Reaver. You have all this way to make 2 things, and if the opponent doesn't deal with it, we've seen what Priest can do to some decks. I'm thinking of Mono Green and Mutate, things that you play in lower Mythic or in Best of 1 that you don't play in a Teamer Rec metagame, where Priest might be really good. So those are adjustments I would make to the deck outside of the Teamer Rec competitive metagame. The way that Jacob has built the deck, I think it's absolutely perfect for the tournament setting. Just to be clear on that, I wouldn't change a thing for this tournament with the deck list.
Yeah, it's both just a very good deck list and also a very good metagame call. So yeah, I mean, the deck just says, I don't care about sweepers, screw your sweepers, play as many sweepers as you want. Okay, don't want to spoil it too much for you, CGB, but in the final game that Raph lost against Michael Jacob, he actually resolved 2 Shatter the Skies and was immediately digging for number 3 to not lose the game. So that any deck that can just keep swinging after 2 rats is doing pretty good. So yeah, anyway, Michael Jacob was saying it's my mission to get Winota banned. Which I'll harken back to saying that was one of the cards that I nominated to get banned back in the Purge, the Great Standard Purge.
Yep, that's true. You were straight up soapbox ranting on this one.
Yeah, I just think Winota is a problem, and I think it will continue to be a problem. And if it does not at some point need to be banned in the standard format before it rotates, I'll be surprised.
I think it gets to play the good guy for a minute, right? It gets
That's
to beat
true.
up Teamer Rec and Azorius Control. I think most people would say that Winota's like the fair deck right now. That's sick. That's sick, isn't it?
Which is what kind of a world are we living in, right? Where Aetherworks Marvel is called the fair deck. That's the funny thing about this is that it's like playing Aetherworks Marvel, except instead of the supporting cast being dorky, useless cards like Woodweaver's Puzzle Knot, they're reasonable cards like Woe Strider. So anyway, I don't need to continue on my soapbox there, but Winota definitely proving herself to be just an absurdly powerful card that can just close out the game on turn 4 easily without breaking a sweat. So anyway, we'll have to keep an eye and see if like Winota archetypes, maybe this is just a flash in the pan and Winota is not actually a problem. But deck is strong, man. It's very strong. And it's possible that in a post-rotation world, Winota might actually become an apex predator. Anyway, let's see what else showed up in the top 8 here. John Sacrifice, piloted by Christopher Larson. Now, it's funny to hear the commentators and the pros discussing this because pretty much everyone agrees that John Sacrifice just doesn't or shouldn't have a particularly good matchup in this tournament setting. And Christopher Larson was basically like, middle finger, I'm good at this deck, I'm going to play it in this tournament, and took it into the top 8. So,
have you met Christopher Larson?
I have not met him, no.
I had to ask because your impression of him was perfect. Middle finger, What else did he say? I don't care what you think. Middle finger. I'm taking this deck. No, the truth is, Christopher Larson, a person I have met. I spent about 2 weeks with him in Rome and Barcelona. He basically everybody told him not to play Jund Sacrifice in this event, that it loses to Teamer, including pros like and coverage guy Corey Baumeister just straight up laughed at him and was like, you're such an idiot. Chris is a stubborn guy, but he's also one of the best Magic players in the world. And he brought this deck anyway. He said, it's what I know. I'm playing what I know. And he ran the deck he is really good with, and he high rolled a few matchups. If you watch the coverage, oh my goodness, he high rolled Canister, Piotr Glogowski in particular. Which,
by the way, isn't that just such sweet justice? Of all people to high roll playing Jund Food when they're playing Teamer. Canister, that's just so satisfying.
People who know Canister's backstory, he just high rolled people playing Jund last year and won a Mythic championship doing it. So the irony. And on the way out the door for a final kick in the butt, Chris gave Canister the GG,
gave him the BM
prematurely.
Yes.
Gave him the BM GG. And Canister is known for BM emotes.
Yeah, he was just doing his best Canister impression, and let me tell you what, he nailed it. So, a few interesting things looking at this deck. First of all, 3 copies of Solemn Simulacrum in the main deck. That really stood out to me. I feel like a lot of these lists were like main decking maybe 1, and maybe had 1 in the sideboard. So, like, this is a statement. What do you, like, is this just to try to get him up to cast his Bolas's Citadel? What do you think is going on here?
If it were just about the Citadel, then there's only 2 Citadels in the deck with a third in the sideboard. This is about not falling too far behind to decks that aren't Teamer. Wilderness Reclamation decks are going to build a huge mana advantage, and most of the decks that are competing with them have given up on trying to win from a position of a mana advantage. If you look at Rakdos, if you look at Mono Green Sans Nissa, and if you look at some of these other decks in the top 8 like Blue-White, they're not generating a mana advantage. And obviously, he must think his Teamer matchup is okay because he played the Citadel, this Jund Food deck, in the Teamer Pro Tour, which is pretty surprising to everybody. But you can tell that he's also saying, I might not always beat Teamer. I'm playing a deck that the pros believe is at least in some way not favored against Teamer, but I want to beat everybody else. So in matchups against everybody else, he's generating a mana advantage in kind of a way that most other decks that aren't Teamer and aren't Bant have given up on. Like if you're not playing Uro and you're not playing Wilderness Reclamation, then you're probably not worried about mana. But Chris is willing to play a few cards for value that give him that advantage and let him have those huge Citadel turns and those huge Corvold turns and just take this kind of overpower you in action, as opposed to also in cards, but mostly in just what you can do with your mana.
Yeah. I mean, I don't hate it against Teamer either. It's kind of like one of the easiest ways to lose to Teamer is that they end up having 1 million mana and you have like 3 mana or something like that. And so I like the idea of at least having some semblance of trying to keep up, being able to maybe double spell in a turn. Not the worst idea there. And it's also like, if it gets hit by a Scorching Dragonfire, that's just not a terrible interaction for you there. You're still up a card, even if it's only a land. So, yeah,
you throw it in the oven, you still get the card.
Yeah.
It's great. It's
perfect. Great. Yeah, so, yeah, there's a lot to like about that. I noticed in order to make space for those, it looks like he's shaved off 2 Claim the Firstborn from his main deck. What do you think about going down Claim in a Teamer metagame? Like, is that a great call? Because on the one hand, it's like, yeah, they don't main deck a lot of creatures, right? So Claim could be considered to be somewhat of a dead card against Teemo. But on the other hand, like, these Teemo decks live in fear of having their Oro claimed. So, like, what do you think about that decision?
In terms of Teamer being afraid of getting its Uro claimed, it's smart because it's 2 isn't a number that you're going to have it all the time, but it's enough that they usually have to play around it. And it's important to remember that this tournament is open deck list, so people can see each other's numbers before and during the match, whenever they want to. So 2 claim is enough that you have to respect it, but not enough that it's going that if they are respecting it, you're hindered. Because how many times have you played a Rakdos deck and had like 3 or 4 claims in your hand, and your opponent's playing well around it?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, on ladder yesterday, my opponent, I just knew they had 3 claims from the way that it was going. I literally played a Hydroid Krasis that was an 8/8, then cast Ritual Soot to kill it, and said go. and
move.
Yeah, dude. Eventually, I saw these claims come out because they were just using them to give like their Mayhem Devil haste or whatever. But like, another good play just to flex a little more on this particular player. I was using Nissa and I was animating Fabled Passage.
Oh, yep.
So,
genius move there, people. Yep. Genius move. Think about it.
So yeah, if your whole game plan revolves around claim, then and you draw too many, and your opponent's smart, you're in a terrible spot. If it's just a 1 or a 2 of, they have to respect it. Yeah. So I think it's really smart because I think the deck is good against aggro anyway, and I think claim is mostly a way to pick on aggro. So it wasn't that long ago that Jund wasn't even running claim, like the Jund version. Then it went up to 4 claim. I think that was a Crokeyz innovation. And then now I think 2 is perfect for this meta.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and he's got 2 in the board for those creature matchups, so got his bases covered. Well, cool deck list, and congratulations to him for beating all of the odds and getting into the top 8 anyway. Now, finally, I wanted to take a look at the last deck in the top 8, which has just been steamrolling, like utterly steamrolling this tournament. It's Mono Black Aggro by Riku Kumagai. So this deck has, in some ways, the guts of some of these mono black aggro decks that we've come to expect. But if you take a look at his list, it's actually very finely tuned. And it's actually... I think that this is kind of a metagame masterpiece, to be honest. And especially watching him play the deck is like... I don't know. It's a work of art. So this guy 100% deserves his top 8 finish. And as far as I knew when I last checked in, he was still live in the tournament. So he might be able to take it all away.
Yeah, I'm going to quickly interrupt and let you get into it. But I just want to say, if we have any fans out there good at memes, I want the jealous girlfriend meme. The jealous girlfriend is mono green. And the hot girlfriend that Arjuna is looking at now is mono black. Yep. You know, and here's the thing. The romance started slipping. It was 1 or 2 episodes ago where I was looking at the meta game, and it was just clear to me that mono green wasn't gonna take down a tournament anytime soon. I think that the reign of terror has mostly ended for mono green. But it was a fun ride. And I think you can still easily make Mythic on the ladder playing it if that's where your heart lies. But yeah, this mono black deck is just the bee's knees. So let's take a look at it. So he's running 28 creatures. So 2 Blacklands Paragon, 4 Gutterbones, 4 Hunted Nightmare. We will definitely come back and talk about that one. 4 Kitesail Freebooter, 4 Knight of the Ebon Legion, 1 Murderous Rider, it's a little fun onesie there, 3 Rankle Master of Pranks, 4 Spawn of Mayhem, 2 Timurit Chosen from Death, which is an interesting main deck inclusion there. The only non-creature spells in this deck are 3 Duress and 4 Heartless Act, playing 25 lands, 4 Castle Lochthwain, 2 Mobilized Districts, the rest are swamps. The whole thing from start to finish is a metagame deck. I'm super impressed with the read on the meta. So I would just highly encourage you to don't just sleeve this up and take it onto the best of 1 ladder and expect that you're going to get tournament winning results with it, because there are some very specific things going on here. So
The first one is that you can see that he's playing around Temur and just these reclamation decks from the get-go. Blackland's Paragon is a nice flash threat that you can get around your opponent's sweeper. The Temur deck likes to play a lot of instant speed, and so if you can play at instant speed as well, so much the better for you. Let's talk about these Hunted Nightmares, because this is just like, this is some sick tech here. Now, this card is here in place of a notable absence, because what's this deck missing, CGB? What's the one card that everyone's been playing against Temur that's missing from this deck?
Rotting Regisaur is the one you're looking for.
Indeed it is. And kind of word got out that Reggie was one of the best sideboard answers to Temur. They just frankly weren't running many good answers to it, and it was just coming down early and stealing a lot of games. And so as a result, these reclamation decks started running Solar Flare, the 4-color versions. And so one of the nice things is that if you go down this list, there are just a number of cards that don't die to it. You've got Murderous Rider, you've got the Hunted Nightmare, and even sometimes the Timurit Chosen from Death, depending on, you know, what your board's looking like, might actually be able to dodge it as well. Kitesail Freebooter as well. It's a 1/2, right? So that gets around it. So that was one of the first things that he decided to do, was to just make a deck that was as resilient to Solar Flare as possible.
Solar Blaze.
Oh, is it Solar Blaze?
Just to help out a few people out there whose ears are burning.
Thank you.
You know who you are. You know who you are.
Card I haven't sleeved up in a while, clearly. So that's really sweet. And, you know, Hunted Nightmare it's a 4/5 for 3, which, you know, is just obviously good stats. And against Temur especially, there's just going to be a lot of times where they don't even have a creature. And even if they do have a creature, it getting Death Touch doesn't really matter. So it's just a sweet bit of tech, and he's been absolutely crushing people last weekend and this weekend using this. So overall, I think this deck is really sweet. The one surprise for me was playing 3 Rankles. Like, in a world of Shock Typhoon, do you really want to be playing 3 Rankles? What do you think about that?
Well, you don't want to play it into a Shark Typhoon, and I think that we're definitely being cognizant of that, because there's a lot of other things that are great to play into a Shark Typhoon, like a Hunted Nightmare is a really good example of a card that you're pretty happy to have on the board when your opponent is holding up their Shark Typhoon. Duress goes right after the Typhoon. Heartless Act can interact with it at instant speed. Rankle, for me, anytime I play an aggro deck in this format, or a mid-range deck, and something happens to the board where it gets cleaned up by an Ugin, a Wrath, or my opponent casts 3 or 4 spells in one turn and just wrecks everything, I untap and I look at my hand and I say, where's the haste creature?
Yeah.
Where's a way that I can finish this game? I've got them at 2 frickin' life. I need how do I make this end? Or how do I get this Teferi off the board before it pluses? Or this Ugin off the board before it pluses? And I think that Rankle is a necessary card for Mono Black, quite honestly. It would be one of the last cards I'd consider cutting, because it's one of the only good haste threats that you can slam down after your opponent's dealt with the board.
Mm-hmm. Another thing I noticed conspicuously absent from this list is the Demon Hug. Is that card getting phased out, or is it just not a good match for this particular deck in this particular meta game?
Oh, it's not a good card for a Players' Tour final. Let me add to this. When you are playing Magic, a lot of cards are powerful, a lot of cards are flexible, a lot of cards are good, a lot of cards are interesting. What this deck has done really well is it's removed the cards that have a super high ceiling and a really low floor.
Yeah.
So, Rotting Regisaur, super high ceiling. If they can't kill a 7/6, it's going to finish you really fast. Super low floor. If they can remove it and you had to discard a card, you 2-for-1'd yourself and you spent 3 mana on something that did nothing but hurt you.
Yeah, horrible against Brazen Borrower.
Yeah, no advantage gained, right?
Yeah.
Demonic Embrace, the Demon Hug, like you said, is another one of these cards that if your opponent isn't interacting with it in any way, super high ceiling. Now your creature flies. Now your creature can't be blocked. Now it gets that damage in, and you can play it again and again from the graveyard. But if your opponent does have instant speed removal interaction that is appropriate for the format, they will find a way to punish you for making that play. And when you are playing Magic on ladder, your opponents aren't out there necessarily thinking how to punish Demonic Embrace. It's not the top of the meta. I don't even know if it's on the top 10 if you look at meta stats on any of the websites. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
When I design a deck, even a control deck, I'm not thinking of how to make your Demonic Embrace, Rotting Regisaur miserable. I'm usually thinking about Embercleave and wide boards.
Yeah.
When you play an event on a competitive level, like a player's tour, not only is every player going to be tuned into the format, every player is going to have either in the main deck or sideboard, they're probably going to have somewhere around 4 to 10 interactive spells made to punish you if you go for the high ceiling play, whatever it is, because that's what sideboarding at that level usually involves. Here's a few interactive cards that keep the opponent from making their really high ceiling play. Like that's most of it. So at this level, yeah, you don't want the Regisaur. You don't want the Embrace. Your opponents are going to be good. They're going to be sideboarding well. They're going to be ready for you to go in on these cards. This deck goes up the middle with reliable cards that are hard to punish. Hunted Nightmare sounds like a punishable card. It's not. Who has two creatures on the battlefield? And if they do, one's gonna die to a Heartless Act, and it's still unblockable because it has Menace. Storm's Wrath. Ha. Solar Blaze, Justice Strike. Ha. Do not care. Does not matter. Hunted Nightmare laughs at you.
Like I said, it's a masterpiece of metagaming, and I also just like how, like we just did a deep dive with Rant on the many builds of mono green, and what I love about this format is that we've had many builds of mono black as well. And that might be a fun one to do before rotation, is to just try to find a top shelf mono black player and just really go through the different permutations, because these lists can look very, very different. And it's actually really sweet when you're in a format where even your monocolor aggro deck has a lot of options and a lot of different possible builds that could all be quite viable. So I'll keep my eye out, and maybe that's the thing. I mean, heck, maybe you and I could do it, CGB.
How's your Japanese?
Yeah, Japanese is so hot.
Yeah, we've got one here, but it was Witch, arena screen name Witch, which I believe is Kakamai, Kakami. Mm-hmm. But yeah, apparently the Japanese are capable of running mono black to amazing results. But Witch was number 1 on ladder, the first number 1 of last Mythic season with mono black as well.
Yeah. So, well, keep an eye out for that. That might be a possibility. All right, well, I think that's going to wrap it up for this segment, but we will be looking definitely to see the outcome of this weekend, and I think that's, it's like the first major tournament we've had in a long time, so we'll be reporting on the results of that in some measure probably next week. All right, well, CGB, I'm really excited to get around to the crown jewel of this episode, and one of the most exciting things that happened for a lot of people in the Magicverse this week, which was Stephen Croke, the one and the only Crokeyz, issued his challenge to Paper Boomers. So CGB did a whole show about this on stream.
Yes, I did.
And remind me, I think that you actually posted that show to your CGB gaming account. Is that right?
Yes, it is posted to my second YouTube channel, and it's available on Twitch in the VOD section.
Yeah, so if you want to see like the whole setup and the whole discussion around it, you can go and check that out. But CGB, why don't you just give us like a brief overview of how this beef started and how it evolved?
Brief, sure. Magic Twitter is full of people who like to rate and berate each other's accomplishments from the many years of playing this game at a high level. Andrew Ellenbogen is a Pro Tour champion who gave his top 10 list of MTG accomplishments, and he threw out there, after number 10, there was a ... and then it said number 100, getting number 1 on Mythic Ladder on Arena. Just a little shade, little shade. As the Arena Craft podcast, I do not stand with this very condescending and obviously, just mean-spirited view of the accomplishment of Arena Mythic #1 status. But, that's a whole other topic that we got into on the show as well. We had Danny, who's been #2 on many occasions, talking about the win rates he had to have to be #2. Like, this is not a good GP. This is a good month of GPs, So anyway, that's a whole other subject. Because this is only relevant because people started tagging Crokeyz because the guy has done such a good job with his stream and he's so popular and he builds decks and he's so consistent about chasing and achieving #1 Mythic status that people immediately think of him when they think of #1 Mythic. And he responded by saying some really funny stuff, calling Andrew Ellenbogen a paper boomer. Which is a new term in MTG, but something that apparently Arena players can use to refer to people who play Paper Magic and MTGO, MTG Online. So it's kind of one of my guests, Power Dragon, put it awesomely. Like how many games can have a generational rivalry like this? Very, very few. So this is a rivalry now between people who played Paper and MTGO and people who grind on Arena. And this blew up on Twitter, like people saying all kinds of stuff to each other, some of it rather nasty. And then Crokeyz put out a tweet saying, hey, I'm trying to put together what he calls the Paper Boomer Gauntlet. He was trying to get 8 opponents to play one best-of-3 match against him each. And for every loss, he was planning to donate $250 to charity. And that event happened on Wednesday. And he had 8 decks, 5 historic and 3 standard, and he picked them at random to play against his opponents, who each brought a deck of their own. And it was a really great show. I'm not sure how deep you want me to go into the results or where you want to pick up the ball and talk about decks or how you want to play it, but I watched pretty much all of it. I know that you were moving and couldn't be there a lot of the time, but this for me was must see Twitch TV, and Crokeyz hit over 8,000 viewers on Random Wednesday in the middle of a dead standard format, which is mind-blowing to me.
Yeah, so for comparison, the Magic Players Tour coverage on Twitch during the same time frame was peaking at about 10k viewers. So Crokeyz hit basically 80% of a Players Tour in viewership. So this was like the second most important tournament that has happened in a very, very long time, basically, as far as like Twitch views are concerned. So yeah, I mean, first of all, just fun, right? I mean, it was a way to stir up some beef and create some drama and create some rivalries and just have a good time. And, Crokeyz, if you don't already know his shtick, I mean, he spits a lot of game, but at the end of the day, he holds it all very lightly. And I think he did a really excellent job of doing that throughout this whole process. And I'll tell you what, it was not easy. Even just watching him frickin' navigate getting his friends list up and issuing challenges and actually having them go through properly was like half of the tilt.
It was hilarious, though. Because the guy couldn't lose in this particular setup, because any time that he even tweeted that we will start at 10 CET on the understanding that my opponents actually figure out how to work MTG Arena, and then sure enough, like from the very first match, every time they were trying to do a direct challenge, they're like his opponents didn't know what the heck to do. There was a bug where if you issue a direct challenge in tournament best of 3, it says to your opponent, "Would you like to play a best of 1 match?" So every single time as they are called for the event, the Paper Boomers would reply like, "Why'd you challenge me in best of 1?" And he's just like, "Just hurry up and queue up, just hit the button." And anytime there was a technical issue, he's like, it's like the whole chat is like, "Frickin' boomers don't know how to use technology." And anytime there was an issue for both players, it was Wizards client, ha ha ha, small indie development company.
Yeah,
it was insanely funny.
Yeah. So give us a rundown. So basically, the format of this was that I think he let the challengers, these 8 paper boomers, decide which format they wanted to play between historic and standard. And then they got to choose a deck, and then basically now, is this right where he chose the decks, but then his chat or a random number generator actually chose the matchups that he would play those decks in? Is that how it went?
My understanding is that he built the decks, and he said chat will decide at random. I have no idea what that process was, but basically the decks were picked at random for each opponent.
Yeah. So I think, right there, can you imagine you're playing a tournament? It's an 8-round tournament against definitely 8 of the best living Magic players that exist currently. Mm-hmm. All of these people could be considered like, top 20, top 50 Magic players of all time. And they all get to pick one deck and practice that deck. And meanwhile, your deck for each of those matchups is going to be a different deck, and it's going to be selected at random on the day of the event. So, I mean, the cards were definitely stacked against our man Crokeyz here, like at pretty much every step of the process.
Yep.
So, what did his record end up being?
Crokeyz ended up finishing with a 4-4 record, and it was a rocky road. I'm giving myself a lot of credit. If you watch my preview show, I made predictions. I was as close to perfect as you can get without being perfect. I had one match flip-flopped. Like, if I had picked Majors to lose and Calcano to win, my predictions would have been perfect. And I did that without knowing the deck lists that were getting played. I was very proud of myself. But
good job.
Yeah. Thank you. I feel like I know a lot about Pro Magic and a lot about Crokeyz. I was perfectly designed for this one job that I had, this one task. But it was definitely a very trying day for him. He really put it out there. And we speculated in my pre-show, does Crokeyz have something to prove? He wants to be considered one of the best players. He's a competitive player. That's not just his brand, that is him. He is a competitor. And he said out loud that when he was at Mythic Championship 3, I believe it was last year, or it might have been a later one. It might have been 6. I'm not sure of the number. But he was at a Mythic Championship last year by invite from Wizards, and he put up a 1-4 finish, which Kai Buddha, one of the best players of all time, tweeted about to kind of rib him for the Paper Boomer thing. But Crokeyz said, he wasn't ready for that. He wasn't ready at the time, and he thinks this is a true test, and he wanted a true test, and he got one. This was insanely hard. He spoke about it many times while playing it, this is pressure he was completely unfamiliar with. Mm-hmm. There were 2 things that went very badly for him. On one occasion, he had a Dovin's Veto, and his opponent wanted to play Nissa, and he had a Fabled Passage in an island, and he fetched a forest.
Was it just a misclick?
It wasn't a misclick. It was one of those things, I've been there. Your brain farts and you think, I want a forest because a forest is better with Nissa or whatever, but he meant to cast the veto.
Yeah.
And he fetched the one land that couldn't cast the veto. And it was just devastating, cost him the game. It was a total landslide from there
against him
one of the best players in the world. Yeah. It was game 3. The other thing that happened is he timed out thinking about how to attack the Field of the Dead deck with the mono white deck.
Yes, and Arjuna move right there.
Yeah, but he got the attack off, but his opponent cast Settle, and because he had timed out, he didn't get to fetch the lands.
Oh, he didn't get the lands, that's right. Which, by the way, that's so savage, the way that lines up. It just... I think that the timeout structure on Arena, especially in more competitive settings, is just not quite tuned. I think that the way it's designed works fine for just regular ladder play, but I think in a custom game or in a tournament game, having the regular timeout thing during matches where there's clearly you're going to cook through a lot of the game, and then you're going to have one turn which is going to decide the whole game of the whole match, and you really do want to just be able to take 2 minutes and think about it, right? So that has always bothered me, just as someone who is used to Magic Online or playing paper Magic. where if it's a really pivotal moment in the match, you can be like, look, I'm sorry, but I'm going to take like a full couple of minutes to just think this one through because it's really important. So I really feel for Crokeyz there, and that particular, like, your timer runs out, it passes you to combat, you attack, and then the game just doesn't give you even just the time to like pick out the lands you obviously would have gotten out of your deck from Settle the Wreckage. So I think that's not his fault, basically.
Well, it doesn't, like, the game was over when the Settle was cast.
That's true.
It was, in this case, it was irrelevant to the outcome. It was just the feels bad of it and the mental drain that you could see, you know?
Yeah.
You could just see the kind of what? Yeah, it's so hard. But on the other hand, there was a happy ending because when Seth Manfield and Crokeyz battled in the last match of the day, and Crokeyz got the win over a world champion MPL member and one of the best players in the world, Seth Manfield, and finished 4-4. You could just see the relief, and he felt like he held his own. He didn't need to win every match. He needed to feel like he could hold his own. And that may not be totally true, with exactly one exception here. He did face Andrew Ellenbogen, the tweet that started it all. And he ended up facing him in a Jund food mirror.
Whoa, dude.
I believe Ellenbogen was on the 75 from Larson. That is in the Players Tour Finals. And Crokeyz does not believe in Solemn Simulacrum. He does not believe in Sad Robot. He was sending trash talk about how is your 4-mana 2/2 lining up in this matchup, you know, like making fun of him.
Yeah.
And Crokeyz lost game 1, and you could just see in his eyes, like, this got real. This just got real. But he came back, he took the next 2, and Chat and Crokeyz, everybody was enthusiastic that the big bad of this particular event, the paper boomer with the biggest of mouths on Twitter, Andrew Ellenbogen, was defeated.
I mean, not only would it have been humiliating from the outset to lose to Ellenbogen, but losing in the Jund mirror would have been particularly difficult because, you know, Crokeyz is definitely a sacrifice player, especially as of late, and definitely an expert Jund pilot, so I think that would have really stung him. So do you wanna just talk through some of the deck lists here? And also, I think it's an interesting pivot for us to talk about Historic, you know, because it was, 5 out of the 8 matches were played in the Historic format?
Yeah, and this weekend is the Historic Open, so as we are recording this, deck lists are getting retweeted, and we're getting our first look at what competitive Historic, like serious competitive Historic looks like. There have been some tournaments held by MTG Arena Zone and held on MTG Melee, but for the most part, the world at large hasn't had to think about Historic from a competitive standpoint until now, so it's a really interesting time to look at the format. And let's see if I can grab the right decks here to put on screen. It's always interesting to see what Crokeyz comes up with, because the guy has pretty much came into Magic from outside Magic and has become a respected mind in deck building because of his approach to metagames. And his decks for this tournament showcase what I think is a really smart approach to Historic that is also accessible to a lot of players. I don't know how many times you hear this. I hear this every day. People just don't play Historic, even though they play a lot of Standard on MTG Arena, because they feel like they have to get more cards. They can't afford cards. They don't this, that. And the Crokeyz approach, as we see here, is he has these decks, and they're basically Standard decks with a few key cards from Historic, a few key crafts, a few exact additions, but Standard is so kind of broken, as we've talked about on the show before, that all you need are a few upgrades, and you can mostly run your Standard deck in Historic and enjoy some things like a slightly different meta, a few sideboard options you didn't have before, better mana in the form of check lands. So what I've got on my screen is a Rakdos Sacrifice deck that wins by comboing off with Bolas's Citadel in Rakdos, because you can play the Citadel insanely early because of a card that's legal in Historic, Phyrexian Tower. This is a rare legendary land that lets you sacrifice a creature to add 2 black to your mana pool. Perfect for a sacrifice deck. Ramps your mana, lets you cast the Citadel quicker. And the other card from Historic in this list is Stitcher's Supplier, which for 1 black, you play that, it mills 3. It's either a common or an uncommon. And
yeah, I think it's
so
it's uncommon.
Very easy craft for most people.
Yeah.
And this card, basically, if you have an oven and you have a Stitcher's Supplier, you're probably going to find a cat. You get 6 extra looks for your cat, which is, that's really good. And with Citadel, it's a way to flip your top card if you hit a land and you have already played a land and your Citadeling would be at an end. Sacrificing your Supplier gets you more looks. So just minor upgrades on an existing good theme that can help players who may already be playing Rakdos Sacrifice get into Historic. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like you said, it's a testament to how powerful Standard is right now. And so that is one of the benefits of playing it. Like, if you want to really play the Historic format and have fun and play around and stuff, you're going to need a very, very deep collection. But if you want to be competitive, yeah, you really don't need much. Like, this deck has, I'm looking, so it has 6 rare lands in it as the only rare crafts for the main deck that aren't standard legal. And then there's 3 mythics in the form of Phyrexian Obliterator, which, you don't even need to run those necessarily in your board if you don't feel like crafting them. So deck's strong. What can you say? Like, this deck is able to be like a top 10 on the ladder deck. So 100% think it's a great choice, and Crokeyz has proved it.
Yeah, it's so strong he ran almost the same deck, except with a little bit of green for Trail of Crumbs and Gilded Goose, and called it a new deck. It is now Jund. It's almost exactly the same deck.
And again, it's mostly just the lands. So Historic is definitely... The sets that have rotated out of it are about as many sets have rotated out as are in Standard at the moment. So the card pool is kind of like roughly analogous in size difference, but because the recent sets are so powerful, you can kind of get away with it. And so I think this is actually a great time to be playing Historic if you want to play it competitively, because give it a year or two and it's just like the difference between a new player's card pool and an existing player's card pool is only going to widen, and the number of sets in the format are only going to widen. And so it's kind of like get in now. If you want to play the format, now is a really good time to get into it.
Yeah, can you imagine being a new player to Arena who never played with Eldraine in Standard and trying to get into Historic?
I mean, I don't even know how you would do it. Honestly.
We should go find one and have them as a guest on the podcast in a year or 2 years when this happens.
The tilting thing is you can't even really buy your way in, You would have to be so wealthy to come to Arena and just buy your way into these decks. You know what I mean? It's like in Magic Online or in Paper Magic, you can be like, okay, yeah, a place out of that is going to be $100. Da-da-da-da-da, right? But like on Arena, you can't just buy an expensive card. It's like your only options are to crack packs, basically. So that, I don't know. That's a whole conversation we could go into. But Paulo Vitor Damaderosa just made a tweet basically saying, I want to play Historic. How do I buy the cards?
Paper Boomer alert.
Well, Paper Boomer alert, but also World Champion alert wants to play your format and is not finding an easy way to do it. I mean, that should be a heads up to Wizards of the Coast. When the best player in the world right now wants to get into the format and is like, I'm noticing a significant barrier to my getting into the format. Something's wrong there. That's honestly like a client issue. The economy is also a symptom of it too. It's a product. Magic Arena as a product has flaws. That's probably a whole show, to be honest. Yeah. So let's look at some of the other deck lists that you pulled up here, because the Rakdos and the Jund Sacrifice lists from Historic were just very, very, very close to the standard lists. But let's look at this mono white Historic deck that you've got lined up for us that Crokeyz played.
Yeah, this has Dauntless Bodyguard, Giant Killer, Isamaru, Hound of Kanda, which is a jumpstart. inclusion, 1 white for a 2/2 doggo. The end. Sweet.
Let me just stop you there for a moment. I love this card design so much. This is like the classic example of beautiful design, right?
It's the opposite of Questing Beast.
The opposite of Questing Beast. Here's what I love about it. It's a 1 mana 2/2. It's undercosted, right? Like just a 1 mana 2/2 with no drawback is too powerful for Magic. So what they've done, it's so elegant. They just made it legendary. That's it.
Yep. You can't go turn 1 Goblin Guide, turn 2 Goblin Guide, Goblin Guide.
Yeah. So that's how they balance the power of this card. Is like, sure, you can run 4 of them in your deck, but if your opening hand has more than 1, good luck winning that game. Anyway, keep going.
So there's also 4 Legions Landing, which, as we'll get to soon, is the only spell in the deck. And then there's 3 Selfless Saviors, 3 Sky Marcher Aspirants, 4 Stonecoil Serpents, 4 Adanto Vanguard, 3 Seasoned Hollow Blade, and 3 Thalia Guardian of Thraben. There's 4 Benelish Marshal and 4 Venerated Loxodon. There's 20 lands. 3 of them are the White Castle. And the thing I want to highlight about this deck that I really like, and then I'll throw it over to you and you can talk about it. I can't build a white aggro deck in Historic like this. I would have never gotten here on my own. I'm just not capable of it. Because as much as I want to play Thalia and say that's the frickin' card I need, I can never not put History of Benalia in my deck. Because that card is frickin' value and an anthem and amazing, and it was powerful, and it propped up the mono-white deck so much in Standard, and it breaks my heart when you actually stop to think about it and say, oh, that card's too slow.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Venerated Loxodon is the sum total of the reason why it's not getting played in the deck, you know? Because I think if you remove the Loxodon, I think that you could make a reasonable argument for that card.
I think it's Thalia. Like, I strong disagree. I think it's Thalia.
I guess that's true, yeah. Thalia, you're right. If you're running Thalia, you can't play History of Benalia, so that's a good point. But another thing to note as well is that some of these previous lists ran more knights. And so History of Benalia's payoff on the 3rd chapter was actually more relevant to a lot of the cards in the deck. This deck is running almost no knights. So I think that that's another reason why it's just not a good include.
That's fair.
This deck is solid. It's super solid. And I think it's actually a good bridge. This is like a good bridge between the version of this deck of old that we got used to playing last year and all of the new cards that have been added to the pool. So I'm kind of stoked, actually. I mean, if you look at this, it's got like cards from Dominaria, cards from Eldraine. We've got this Jumpstart Hound in here. Legion's Landing is an Ixalan card. Selfless Savior is a Ikoria. No. It's a M21 card.
Yeah.
So it's, it's just like, it really is like a sampling of the different sets that we've had. And I don't know, I just think that that's a very cool example of the diversity of the format.
It's can you take 1 white creature from each set for the past X years and make a deck? Does it work?
Yeah.
For white.
It's a great proof of concept.
This is one you're going to like, though. And I like it because this is mono green aggro, so right up your alley. But it's almost a standard mono green deck with just 2 inclusions. I'll let you break this one down.
Okay, right on. So yeah, you'll recognize most of the cards in this list. It looks very similar to the standard deck. So there's a couple of key differences. Number 1, it runs 4 copies of Llanowar Elves. So this was a huge loss when Llanowar Elves rotated out of Standard. This deck took a huge hit because Llanowar is it's a strong card. It's mono green's version of Growth Spiral, right? So because mono green can't be doing that, it can run Llanowar Elves, and that gets you to 3 mana on turn 2. But then it has 4 Pelt Collectors, 4 Stonecoil Serpents, 3 Primal Mites, 4 Scavenging Ooze, 4 Barkhide Troll, 4 Lovestruck Beast. Just totally normal mono green build. But then we come to another wonderful green card that rotated out of Standard as well, Steel Leaf Champion. Now I think that this was one of the first cards. It was one of the first modern creature card designs that we saw last year that really made people think wow, power creep power creep. Because this is a 5/4 that can't be blocked by creatures with a power 2 or less for 3 mana. 3 mana, 5/4, evasion. Whoa, dude. Whoa. You know, I mean, Rent was like, when I saw this card, I was like, what is happening in Magic? So anyway, so that was a big hit to lose that from Standard. Then it's just running 3 Questing Beasts, 3 Vivians, 4 Castle Garenbrig, and 19 Forests. So one of the nice things about this deck is that you basically get to replace a couple of forests with your Llanowar Elves, and that just gives you more gas. Something I was surprised, though, is I feel like lists like this used to run 1 or 2 copies of Galta Primal Hunger at the top end. And I feel like Galta's kind of gone out of style, and it's a little bit hard for me to figure out why, because I feel like it would have good matchups. Like, it's probably decent against Field of the Dead, right? It's probably decent against, I don't know. I mean, it might even be decent against Team Wreck. It's like, once it comes down, how do you really deal with it? Like, Magma Quake can't kill it?
I got the answer.
All right, lay it on me.
It's the analysis from the mono black deck. High ceiling, low floor cards in a best of 3 environment against pros.
Yeah.
It's a different, with known deck lists as well. It's a different format. If you're going to play ladder, either best of 3 or best of 1, you're not going to get punished hard for playing Galta. If you play against really good players in an open decklist situation, you will get punished for these high ceiling cards.
Yeah.
High ceiling, low floor cards.
That's a good call. And I think another thing is just that, and this is actually what I learned playing mono green in Standard as well, you just don't need it to win. You know, like all of these decks trying to play these flashy, expensive green creatures and stuff, it's like, no, this deck can hit 3 land drops and kill you. It's just not, you know, cards like that might actually just be too slow. So, fun deck, dude. This is a really like rock, paper, scissors deck, right? Because like mono green has its great matchups. He absolutely smashed Brandon Burchard.
Brandon Burchard, Sandy Dog?
Yeah, MTG. Sandy Dog.
That was like the closest match. Like maybe you saw game 2. Because if you're talking about game 2, you are right. That was an absurdly close match.
It was a close match. However, Crokeyz did keep, I think he mulled to 6 game 3 and kept a very sketchy hand, and he still won that game. And I think in general, the mono green has a strong matchup versus mono red.
If you watch one matchup from that event, though, like that was a very good match.
And I guess I undersold it. He didn't smash him by any means, so that was inaccurate for sure.
It was also the standard deck. We were talking about the historic one, just to also be clear.
Oh, was it? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good for me to know. But yeah, definitely watch that. That was a great game.
The last historic deck on his radar here is the one that I think everybody is scared is taking over historic, because it posted a 70-something% win rate in one of the tournaments. One of the, I think it was an MTG Arena Zone tournament, but one of the weekend tournaments with over 100 players. 71-point-something% win rate. And that is Wilderness Reclamation. Team Wreck in historic with Field of the Dead. With the Field of the Frickin' Dead.
This deck was like, why don't we just take a handful of the most powerful cards in the format and just put them in the same deck and run it? It was kind of like it was like when you first put Teferi in the Wreck deck, right? It's like the same thing.
About a month ago, by the way. I was all over that one. It was a meme for me, but now the pros are doing it. So
ahead of the curve. So take us through this deck list, because this is, I mean, in some ways this is kind of a spicy meatball.
I wish I had the stats right here, because I think he did 32 land. I'd have to do the math to make sure. But
yeah.
Just if I told you that we're going to play Magic the Gathering, if I told somebody from 1990, say, 6, that we were going to play Magic the Gathering and run 32 land in Historic, not in, like, Legacy. There's, like, a 40-some land deck in Legacy that's known, but, like, this is still weird to me. And it's becoming so common. I have now this week, like in the last 7 days, I've played 2 decks on my YouTube channel with 30 lands in them, in 60 card decks, 2 different decks. And I don't think it's going away because in one of the videos I got mana screwed running that 30 land deck.
Yeah.
Anyway, this has, I think, 32 lands, all the 28 lands you'd expect in Team of Rec plus 4 Field of the Dead, and then you use the historicness of the format for the variety in the mana base so that you can run temples and check lands like Rootbound Crag and Sulphur Falls and shock lands like Stomping Ground and Steam Vents, along with the Triomes, along with a Blast Zone, along with Fabled Passage. It's kind of amazing to me. You are not running any bad lands. You are running this amazing diversity of 32 lands so that your Field of the Dead makes zombies. None of them suck. Yeah. None of them are like a bad gain 1 life or just a guild gate. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. It's like we have enough playable lands now, especially for like a mid-rangey deck like this in the format, that, yeah, you can easily feed a Field of the Dead on a 3-color mana base, you know, which is kind of like unheard of. It's like in the past, these decks usually had to be 4 or 5 colors to really get that diversity of lands and properly take advantage. But this deck is just so powerful, it's like, nah, I'll just run 3 colors, it's fine.
These cards you'd recognize from Standard are Shark Typhoon, Expansion Explosion, Wilderness Reclamation, Uro, and Aether Gust, and Growth Spiral. So, like the Standard deck. The historic additions, besides Field of the Dead, which, by the way, could have been in Standard right now, was meant to be in Standard right now. The only reason it's in Historic and not Standard is because it was banned. But the other cards here, we've got 3 Magma Quake, which is a jumpstart addition to the format, which is basically an instant speed X sweeper for creatures without flying and planeswalkers. You don't sound like you like this.
I've been wrecked so hard by this card on the ladder.
So I'll get to the other one in a second, but Magma Quake is a particularly interesting case with Wilderness Reclamation. If Wilderness Reclamation in Standard wants to play Storm's Wrath, which I do recommend for at least best of 1 and sideboard for best of 3, you have to give up the Wilderness Reclamation turn.
Yes.
So you can either cast, when you have 4 mana available, you can cast Storm's Wrath or Wilderness Reclamation. You have to make a choice. Not with Magma Quake. This is an instant with an X in the cost, so you can play Reclamation and still have Magma Quake available for 2 that turn, which is a big deal. Oh yeah,
yeah.
I mean that's a flame sweep, but it scales up going forward. And
yeah, it's a flame sweep that hits walkers.
Yeah, like Teferi, you know, the card that's good against you. One of the only cards that's good against you. The other card is the card that we mentioned, I believe it was last week, that got added to the format and has me just staring at a wall. Just why? Like, made me rethink my entire existence, which is Explore, which is just an easier to cast Growth Spiral for the most part. So that there's now 8 of these effects. 4 Explore, 4 Growth Spiral, 4 Uro. You just play 2 lands every turn of the game. Your opponent plays 1. And you don't lose anything. You just draw a card for this disadvantage that is supposedly in existence here. I mean, are you kidding me?
CGB, this deck list is deeply troubling to me. Like,
yes.
It's unsettling, all right? It's unsettling. Look, like, okay, let me just read this off to you. And you as a listener, just listen to how this feels, okay? 3 Aether Gust, 4 Explore, 4 Growth Spiral, 4 Oro, 4 Wilderness Reclamation, 3 Magma Quake, 3 Shock Typhoon, 4 Expansion Explosion. That's it. Like those are the non-land cards in the deck. All right. What? Like what? This shouldn't be a deck. This is not a deck. This is literally 12 ramp spells, 4 mana doubling spells, 3 freaking targeted hate cards in the main deck. It's got 3 Wraths, 3 Shock Typhoons, and 4 Expansion Explosions as the only other cards in the deck. It's just, I hate it. I hate it.
And on top of all that, even with that narrow scope, and this is an incredibly narrow deck.
Yeah.
It's basically the top end of the format.
It's like the best deck in the format.
Dude, if you don't kill it in 5 turns, you lose. Because this deck, the longer it plays quote-unquote Magic, the more just free 2/2 zombies it gets from Field of the Dead, and the larger the shoot you in the face and draw a million cards effects like Shark Typhoon and Explosion get. It is the ceiling on the format. It is as big as you go, but it literally is just doing it on turn 5.
It's so messed up, man, because you know what bothers me about this, and I'm not going to harp on this too much, but this deck should be a meme. You shouldn't be able to do this in Magic, because in the past, okay, A of all, running cards like Ether Gust in the main shouldn't be normal. And then B of all, your ramp spells shouldn't be drawing you into more gas. And then C of all, your ramp spells shouldn't be coming back from the graveyard to win the game. D of all, I mean, it's just, it goes on and on. It's like my Cycler shouldn't also be a 6/6 flyer. My frickin' Wrath effect shouldn't be an instant that kills Planeswalkers. Like, what is going on here?
But should your land create infinite 2/2s that also win the game, should you actually not do the other things? Did I mention they're uncounterable?
Oh my gosh.
So what you're harping on is the reason that people have just this reaction of I threw up in my mouth a little at this deck, which is all of these effects should be a significant cost. There should be a downside, right? But when you have Explore and Growth Spiral, like getting to play multiple lands a turn, getting to ramp, unquote, should have a downside. There's no downside to Growth Spiral or Explore. You get a new card. There's no downside to Uro. The downside is someday you get a 6/6 threat that ends the game and makes sure that you never lose to aggro ever. That's the downside. Aether Gust should have a downside, but in the meta, certain colors are so imbalanced that it just doesn't. The only card here with a downside is Magma Quake, and that downside is that it doesn't hit flyers. So that's just about the only thing you can exploit. The main deck that people have turned to, as this has become the deck in Historic, pushing out even the busted Goblin deck that appeared, the main deck that people are turning to is Mono Blue.
Yeah.
Mono Blue, infinite counterspells and flyers.
Yep. And thank God. I mean, really, thank God that this
Thank God for Mono Blue. People hate that deck too. That deck exists on the foundation that everything it gets to do is cheap, and the opponent never gets to play anything interesting. Like that's not the good guy. I know. I've been the bad guy a long time playing decks like that. People hate them.
But that's it. You know, it's like when I look at this deck, I'm like, if I don't not draw against this deck, I lose. That's just how I read this. If every card in my deck lines up perfectly, I have a chance. But if anything goes wrong against this deck, you lose. I mean, I was one of the first people who, like, when I saw Field of the Dead unbanned in Historic, I was like, what?
What is the upside?
Yeah.
What is the upside? Is somebody out there just celebrating this card that's like free 2/2s until the end of the game? It's so weird.
I mean, this card's freaking banned in Pioneer. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Why is it legal in our Historic format? And don't hit me with, well, we also put Ghost Quarter in the format, lol. You know?
Yeah, I hope you've had a really good time. I hope you've had a really good time shutting down Wilderness Reclamation with your Ghost Quarter.
Yeah, have fun with that one, champ. All right, well, I think we've expended enough bile for one day. So that's just a little brief overview of what was happening in Crokey's little tournament, and just a taste of some of the decks that, I wouldn't say all of these decks are even tier 1 in Historic, but they're just a sampling of the format and things that you can play and things that Crokeyz have been playing that have been putting up enough results that he would be considering bringing them to a tournament like this. So I think we don't have time to go into the Historic Open deck lists right now, but CGB, what do you think? Maybe we can next week get a little bit more into the Historic meta game and take a look at what's happening there.
Totally. So as we alluded to, what's going on right now is the Historic Open is being played and people are revealing their deck lists from the best of 1 portion that we're able to get to the 7 wins to qualify for day 2 where it becomes best of 3. And I think that's interesting, but what I really want to know is in best of 3, in competitive, with $2,000 on the line, are people going to play this Team Erect deck or are they going to beat it? So I'm really looking forward to seeing the technology, and we can talk about that next week and figure out Does Field of the Dead need to be banned? Does Wilderness Reclamation need to be banned? Or could the best minds in the game playing for that 2K, playing for the sweet dollar, did they figure out a way? I think it's going to be really cool. I want to know. I am curious. What do you think? Do you think this deck will be beaten?
It's tough. I mean, if people are hard this is definitely the kind of deck that you can hard target and win against, but one of the issues is that decks that hard target this, I think, would lose pretty hard to other prominent decks in the fight. Like what deck could you build that could consistently beat this deck, but also consistently beat goblins? That's a tough one.
We're going to be looking for it.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll find it by next week and we can talk about it on the show.
So yeah, my money's riding on this deck for the moment, but I mean, who knows? A while back, Crokeyz himself was saying that Field of the Dead was a bit too slow. Maybe that was just before, the Hive Mind /he/Danny T-Law /other people discovered this particular build. So perhaps he might rescind his statement. But I think a deck that would beat this would just be a deck that had a really proactive game plan that was looking to win on turn 4. I don't know that Keth's Combo has necessarily got an edge against this deck, but Keth's Combo is the kind of deck that can just be like, I just comboed off faster than you could kill me, taste it. You know what I mean? So I'll be interested to see if there's like a combo deck that can actually just go under this deck or not.
Yeah, likewise.
Yeah, I'm stoked, and I'm just in general getting more and more stoked about Historic as time goes on. So yeah, who knows? Maybe we'll even start to see some Historic videos on CGB's channel.
The main channel is very standard devoted. I notice a big difference when I post Historic content, but I do encourage more people to try it out, so maybe that won't be the case someday.
Maybe the ArenaCraft podcast YouTube account can be pushing out some of that Historic content for our listeners coming up. I will certainly be looking for opportunities to publish content when I can. So yeah, let's talk about that a little bit. You can find ArenaCraft Podcast on Twitch, ArenaCraft Podcast, Twitter, ArenaCraft Pod. If you go to youtube.com/ArenaCraft Podcast, you can find our YouTube channel. It's mostly episodes that have been released just on the platform, but I have been and will be more as the time goes on, just releasing some videos of my play and maybe some deck list, maybe even a little bit something similar to CGB's format. If there's just stuff that I'm enjoying that I want to share with you guys. So that's going to be an expanding part of content coming up. You can find CGB on his YouTube channel, of course. It's one of the main places you can watch him play Magic, but you can also see him play on twitch.tv/CovertGoBlue. And he streams live Monday through Thursday, 4 p.m. Eastern Time. CGB, I'm looking forward to catching up with you next week to talk about more Magic.
Likewise, my friend. See you there.
Awesome, man. Bye-bye.